welcome to the Distant Learning Program of IGNOU. Let me introduce you to the speakers today. I have Dr. Jayashree Jethwani, Professor Jayashree Jethwani from the Indian Institute of Mass Communication. Also on my right is Dr. Vijay Vancheshwar, who is the Deputy General Manager, Corporate Communication of ABB. As I talked earlier, this session is specifically on career opportunities in public relations, a topic I'm sure which all of you will find extremely useful. Dr. Vancheshwar, I would now request you to start the session.
Yes, good afternoon to everybody. Before we go on to career opportunities in PR, it's necessary to understand why PR has become important and why the career opportunities are growing. One of the reasons is today we are talking about an age of interdependence, meaning that each function is not functioning as an independent entity. It is dependent on another function, whether it's marketing or whether it's PR, whether it's production or whether it is sales. So the age of interdependence has meant more competition, has meant that more customers have more and more choices in front of them, and therefore they can decide what to buy, whom to promote, etc. And therefore in this context, public relations plays a very key active role. So what are the skills that some of the professionals of PR need to highlight upon? As I see it, there are 6 of them: written communications, oral communications, interpersonal skills, being team players, being able to handle crisis communications management, and leadership qualities. All these 6 play a very key vital role in rounding up the skills of professionals in PR. You have to be able to write well, you have to be able to communicate well, you have to be able to handle people well in terms of human relations, you have to be a team player and not an individual player, you have to manage crisis situations, because this is a very common phenomenon as we touched the topic in the earlier session. The crisis communication is a key issue, and also leadership qualities. How do you lead people? Given this context, I will just touch upon what are the careers that one can look upon in public relations. Now, the choice is wide and it is becoming wider day by day. We have the media itself, meaning the publishing or the newspapers, magazines, wire services. We have the media in the audiovisual medium like the television. Then we have agencies. We have public relations agencies like consultants who provide skilled expertise to corporate houses, or you could join a corporate house as a PR consultant or as a PR employee, as a PR manager, and then you could be in government, in the defense, educational institutions or hospitals, in public sector and private sector, and of course NGOs, where you could take up causes of social concern and become an active PR agent for transforming society's view on things. So these are broadly some of the things that the career opportunities provide to the professionals of today in public relations. Yes, please, Professor Jethwani might like to provide some inputs on these.
Sure. In fact, just to complement what Vijay said, I'd like to add some more areas of opportunity. To my mind, event management has become a very important upcoming field, and you find this has become a full-fledged discipline by itself. And people with PR attributes and PR background can be very successful in event management. We'll dwell upon that a little later, what it means. And political communication has become another area of career opportunity. You find there was a time political battles were fought just by political, the people who were in politics. But nowadays, especially in India, I mean, in the Europe and America, it has been on for a very long time. But in India, you find since the early or the mid-80s, now the political communication has come in the hands of strategists, communicators, media specialists. And somebody spoke about chairman's speech. Now you need speech writers even for the political bosses. And last time I was reading somewhere that there was a guy who was writing, hundreds of speeches which he was dishing out to various political personalities, and he made quite a fortune out of that. So the people who have good writing skills and understanding about the society, political science and the politics can be very successful. Another area which comes to mind is of the financial public relations. Now I find since the 80s there has been a lot of upliftment in the primary market. You find there's a lot of investment by small investors. Now financial public relations is a very specialized field, and it's not a cup of tea of the normal ad agencies which are launching products. You need more of PR skills than advertising skills. So this itself has become a great area of opportunity for the PR persons. Another area which comes to mind, we just spoke about media per se, media itself. Now, media tracking is a very important field now, especially in the 90s when there's a proliferation in the media. For long time, 30, 40 years, we had only one electronic media in this country, government control. Now you have an average, home has about 40 channels to view, and the cumulative program is about 750 hours. If you look at the kind of, programs media dishes out, you find there's a lot of input on business communication. Almost every channel has a business, program. That is where the role of public relations come. So that is as far as the production is concerned, on the supply side is concerned. On the demand side, I find that more and more corporates, especially because of the competitiveness in the market field, they would like to know how media is perceiving them. Though media is not a very accurate barometer of public opinion, but more often you find that what media writes is taken very seriously by the political bosses. You find something coming in the media and it is discussed in the floor of the House, in the Parliament, and the corporates also would like to know how media is perceiving them. So media tracking has become itself a very important area of opportunity. I would even go to the extent of saying that the people would like to be independent entrepreneurs in this field, just got to have a computer at their disposal. If they learn media tracking, they can be fully employed, earning a lot of money and doing a job which can really satisfy them to the hilt.
Great, Jayashree. I'm sure that brings in a lot of hope for our students. Dr. Vancheshwar, would you like to expand a little more on the career opportunities, and then we will.
Yes.
I'll get back to Jayashree and get her very specific views on this. And
yes. Well, the career opportunities, as I said, are becoming wider for practitioners of PR. You could look at journalism itself, as I mentioned earlier. In fact, it's a good point to start with journalism and then maybe graduate on to PR house or on to a corporate house, because being a journalist provides you a variety of opportunities to handle different subjects. It's like a consultant who handles different projects. So a journalist gets a variety of assignments, his exposure is good, and then he picks up knowledge on various aspects of businesses. So from journalism, one could then graduate on to a specialized line depending on his interest. Maybe it could be in an NGO, it could be in a corporate house, or it could be, for example, in a consultancy. And as was mentioned earlier, with time one could even start off on your own. That's becoming increasingly attractive if you're capable and if you're competent. And with today's facilities of computers and technology, a good PR consultant can become a very good entrepreneur and do well in this line of business.
Yes. Jayashree, IIMC is of course a very, very premier institute, and you have your own students there. How do you tackle a lot of queries from students when they are fresh from their courses and out into the market looking for jobs? What advice would you give to students who are in this discipline as to find the right job for themselves?
Okay. Before that, Seema, I'd like to dwell a little on what kind of training the institutes must impart to make a perfect public relations person. I'm sure many are doing, but I can tell you what IMC does, as far as the PR education goes. It is two-pronged, the academics and the skill imparting or the professional grooming of the students. Now, it's very important for us to groom students, as perfect PR people, but before that, the concepts must be right. They must understand the environment, they must understand the media, they must understand why PR and how of the PR. And then when it comes to learning, I call it interactive learning. And specifically, we give them training on media writing, media handling. We give them skills on, employee communication, how to write for employees, the house journals they might, edit once they become professionals. And then crisis management, as we spoke in the morning, is a very important input of public relations. So we give them a lot of simulations about crisis communication or crisis management. A lot of things are happening in the society. In fact, once their concepts are clear, then I tell them that you stop reading the books, now you start practicing right away. Because, you found that there are so many things happening in political side, the economic side, the societal side. So we pick up issues and tell them to give us communication strategies and give us communication solutions. And then we give them a lot of role plays. I spoke briefly about media tracking. Now, media tracking can be both qualitative as well as quantitative. Now, as I said, that corporates are interested to know how the media is perceiving them, how they are writing about them. So we give them information or skills about how to track media, both qualitatively and quantitatively, and they do a lot of simulations on that. And then Vijay spoke about joining an NGO or a government sector. Now, if you look at the government information sector, now the basic job is to disseminate information about those hundreds of schemes the government takes on to for the welfare of the people. The recent example which comes to mind is the pulse polio, which happened last year. Again, it's happening. I think 2 dates have been announced. And this is one of the triumphs of public relations. The way a variety of media was used and hundreds of thousands of newspapers used, and both the traditional and the modern media was used to reach out to the people who may not be who may not have the accessibility to media per se. So both traditional media and non-traditional media was used. Now there you require public relations techniques. So we inculcate among our students an idea about campaign planning. They are supposed to debrief campaigns, how campaign works, and at the end of the year, the whole class in fact is converted into a kind of an ad agency. And apart from playing the roles, doing the role plays, they are supposed to work right from defining a problem to producing the campaign. So they have they go through the mill, they know the nitty-gritty of how to think of a campaign, think of an issue, and produce a campaign. I spoke about event management. Now, event management could be a small event, which needs, we all are very good managers in our lives. If you look at women, I think probably the best managers on earth. Despite all the scarcities we have, they are able to manage their households. So when you look at the professional management, I think we can take the cues from how we manage the households. So event management is not just managing an event, but now it has become a very important strategic decision in the overall communication plan of a company or on an organization. I rather request you, Seema, to throw more light, because I'm sure you are into event management also. So we give a lot of input to the students on event management also, so that they are able to understand the nitty-gritty of that. Rather to you.
Thanks, Jayashree. Yes, as you rightly said, yes, event management is very definitely becoming a profession by itself. It was earlier looked at as one of departments within maybe a large public relations consultancy, but I think more and more entrepreneurs and people are getting into an event management as a profession, because I think there are very specific skills required for a person who is into event management. I would also like to say here, since I've gone through the same teething pangs or the same experiences which a lot of students would go through, and one of the $1 million question really is which profession is going to be right for me. I think what Jayashree and Dr. Vancheshwar have said earlier, I think it's very important to really introspect and take a look at your skills, because each individual, I think, is very good at a certain job, and if you really look at your skills, what you're good at, I think it will help you choose the right profession, and you will be happier after you have chosen the right profession. Within public relations, as our panelists said earlier, there's a vast spectrum of opportunities available. It could be media tracking, as Jayashree said, event management. You could be a political public relations person, political commentator. You could be on the communication side of a large organization, as Dr. Vancheshwar is over here, or you could be with a public relations consultancy, which I'm representing over here. But the most critical part really is to hone in your skills with a task that you take on, because that is where you spend more than 8, I would say almost 10 to 12 hours in today's pressure environment on your job. And it's very important that you choose right. You choose right and you choose well, because you have to be in a profession, you have to be in a job which gives you a lot of happiness, which gives you a lot of satisfaction. So I will ask Jayashree and Dr. Vancheshwar maybe to take it further from here, and how exactly does a person who is just out of his course is looking for a job, how does he make that critical difference that whether I should be in a PR consultancy, whether I should be he could be in large organization, he could be in event management. He does have a fairly vast spectrum to choose from. But the critical decision is where which is that first step, which is that first job that I take.
Yeah. Perhaps, yes, it's a very important thing because you need to finally do what you like the best, because if you do something that you like, you're bound to do it well. And one of the things maybe that aspiring students can do is undertake an aptitude test, whereby you can identify what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are your potential areas for tapping which you could use upon and develop. Because most often you find that you have some latent abilities which are not being fully utilized, or you have not had the opportunity to utilize. So it's very important to identify your strengths or potential strengths, and then choose a career in PR which dovetails with your strengths so that you are able to give off your best. Because mind you, it is a challenging line, it is a competitive line, and you have to necessarily perform well, and you will perform well if you identify your strengths and dovetail that with your opportunities that are available. And it will be also easier then to get an opportunity of your choice. So I would reckon that identifying your strengths and training yourself for the skills that are needed is very crucial.
Just to complement what Vijay said, that when you choose communication as a career, I'm sure you already have thought about your strengths and you think that you are a good communicator. But it's very important that you should not become a communicator by default. It should be by design, because as I said, that if you are a communicator, it's not just writing good or being smart or communicating heavily. It's very important that you should have a very active interest in human beings and institutions. Human beings must interest you. I'm not telling that you have to be crusader or missionary, certainly not. But then communication is just a means, it's not an end. So it's very important that you must probe within yourself and see that do you have interest. Just being smart is not enough. You should be a thinker. If you really ask me what is the first ability to be a good communicator, is to think about society per se, the people, and at your own self, because the whole gamut of communication, the science and art of communication is reaching out to the minds of the people.
I would also like to throw up another issue here. I really believe that what is interesting for a lot of PR practitioners is that even though we had talked about earlier that there are certain different kind of opportunities available, whether it's event management, it could be political commentators, it could be on the public relations consultancy side or the client side. But I think what is interesting is that these roles are pretty much, you can pretty much switch these roles. For example, if you are working in a public relations consultancy, you don't necessarily always have to be there. In fact, it works quite well if you have experience on both sides of the table, which is if you have experience on the client side and then decide to move over to a PR consultancy or would like to go back to the client side. Similarly, you could be working in an advertising agency, you could be an economist. There are people who are architects, people who are engineers who have moved over to advertising and public relations. As Jayeshi said earlier, an understanding and I think an eagerness to learn is very, very critical in this profession, and a holistic understanding of the disciplines, the humanities, whether it's history, whether it's culture. I think a constant ability to absorb things, a constant desire and to learn new things, these are pretty much very interesting skills which help public relations practitioners a lot. And like I said earlier, you can switch from one type of public relations practice to the other. That's what makes, I think, this profession so much more interesting. Jayeshi, would you agree with me here?
Absolutely, yes. Another thing I'd like to say, because we are churning out thousands of students in the discipline of mass communication every year, but there aren't probably thousands of jobs for them. That's where the real catch lies. Yeah. So one, as I said, that you look for the career opportunities in the newspapers, look for campus selections, and also be a little smart, because a person who's in PR has to be a go-getter, a person has to be extrovert, a person who can manage his or her own self. That is the first criteria to be a successful PR person. So don't feel shy, making a nice CV and going around PR consultancies, because much they don't advertise. I haven't seen, years any PR consultancy advertising for the PR post, and there could be any number of PR posts available. So I would suggest go around with your CV and don't feel threatened or don't feel disheartened if they tell you there's no job now. I've seen, my students over the years, that they leave their biodata CV and they say, ma'am, we could not go beyond the receptionist. I always tell them nothing is wrong. You go to another, PR consultancy. But the same, PR consultancy, they call them after a couple of months. Should they need their services? So don't get disheartened. Go around, and show your skills. And also while you are studying, it's very important to maintain what I call as a scrapbook, because you do a lot of work while being a student. I mean, they're very important, and that's why I would like you to be very serious in your studies, because you could have done some crisis management, you could have debriefed some campaigns, you could have done some role plays. So make cassettes, make audio cassettes, make video cassettes, make, if you're doing a research project, because when you're going to a PR consultancy or anywhere, these things come in very handy, because they're kind of your passports to the job market.
And yes, one other thing that could be done is whenever you're looking out for a job, maybe identify some of the problems that they face and go up with a solution to it. That's being proactive. You should maybe look at issues that the company faces or the consultancy faces or the institution that you're seeking a job at has, and go with alternative solutions. So there you will involve them and get them interested in you as a person, because you've taken the pain to understand the problems that they are facing.
I really agree with you, Vijay, because I've seen some of the students, because they didn't have any other job. So they're used to doing this, simulations, and they went with solutions to the clients and they ended up getting the jobs.
Yes.
Another thing I would like the panelists to touch upon here is, we've talked about career opportunities, we've talked about the skills, and we've talked about dovetailing your skills to the profession that you're looking at, or to the specific discipline that you're looking at. But I think one of the things which is also extremely important, and I would like both Jayashree and Dr. Vancheshwar to comment on this, is it's important to find out is the organization that you're looking at must be tailored to the stage of your career that you are in. I think that is extremely critical. For example, an organization which is new but which has a good future would give you much more opportunities to learn than maybe an organization which is already very established and is very large. So I think that part is very critical too, because when you probably go into an organization which is young but professional, I think the opportunities to learn and grow will be much more for you than going to a very, very seasoned or an established player. Jayashree, what do you think?
Very well said, very well said. Yes. Because what happens sometimes, the youngsters who get into mass communication, because the power of the pen is intoxicating, and they start thinking at times that, okay, we can win the world.
The area of research, I don't know, maybe you can educate us whether the research is an area in PR which is taken up. I think it's still in an infancy stage.
Yes.
If somebody is looking at an academic career in PR, I wonder if institutes offer higher research opportunities for students.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have any academic courses in research per se, but then now things are looking up. We do at IMC, I'm sure at most of the institutes which teach public relations and mass communication, there's some input on research, but then research is being taken very seriously in the marketplace. You find a lot of research outputs, and even it's not just impact studies, even they're pre-testing the messages. And also, as the PR research is concerned, I think political field is the biggest field, with coalition governments and governments falling and coming every 2-3 years, as a great opportunity area for the people who are into communication. You find this opinion poll service. You need people with this background, and you find image service conducted by corporates. And now with the liberalized economy, with a lot of multinationals being here, you find that most of the corporates, the good ones, they are going in for research. When the liberalization happened, so we were talking about change management, because they thought that the Indian mind was chock-a-block, wasn't changing. And I know about some corporates, the good ones, the blue chip companies, they went in even for image service and also public opinion service about their company, mapping the perceptions of the people, and also for changing the mindset of their own employees. They did a lot of employee service. So this is a continuing field and a very upcoming.
Jayashree, I think we could possibly talk a little about writing, how writing could really be, and people who are skilled in writing.
Yeah.
For example, there are a lot of opportunities within organizations for newsletters, their employee newsletters, their dealer newsletters. You have annual reports which are looked at as very important PR tools. So you could actually be working within an organization, or you could also actually be a freelancer and could make it into a very successful profession.
It's a very important point you raised. Now, I find that some of the corporate sector, because they get back to us also, they're looking for a lot of people from journalism background, public relations background to be writers. Now, most of the corporate sectors have in-house communication magazines. And I remember, I was organizing a workshop when I was informed that one of the company has a house magazine which is circulation 50,000. In some of the newspapers don't have that circulation. Now they need dedicated writers for that. There's immense opportunity for the people with journalism background to join corporate sector because they can write pretty well.
Very true.
Well, that was a very, very interesting discussion. I would just like to sum up the session. We have tried to touch a wide spectrum of topics in career opportunities, and I think and I hope that we have answered a lot of queries, a lot of anxiety which the students might be facing today. We've touched upon the fact that the role of public relations is changing. Therefore, the skills required for public relations professionals are also undergoing changes, but at the same time you do have a vast spectrum of career opportunities available to you. Our panelists have specifically taken up event management, political communications, financial public relations, writing as a skill, and Jayashree had talked about the fact that it's very important for PR professionals to be thinkers. Dr. Vancheshwar had talked about how research is very important. He talked about image surveys being done by companies, and all these gamut of public relations issues could actually be handled by people who are looking at career opportunities in public relations. So the need of the hour really is to be the master of all trades, as was pointed out by Jayashree here earlier, not the jack of all trades, but definitely the master of all trades. Media tracking was touched upon a lot in detail. I'm sure that some of you listening and watching to this, and watching this program might think about looking at media tracking as a definite career opportunity. I hope we have been able to answer a lot of your questions and touched upon a lot of issues which might have been there in your mind.